What we can do is take action now to make sure that the money we have appropriated will not run out before the end of the year. This is the consideration that the governor has made and why he has announced these numerous closures and many other steps to live within the budget that was passed. At the hearing in Rockford, Representative Belloc asked that we provide a walk down to show that conclusion in the affected agencies, and I furnished that to Dan Long this morning. I hope he's had a chance to distribute it to the members as part of the official record. We started, as we did that walk down, assuming the actual head count that was in place as we started the fiscal year. And then we looked specifically at the lines we had available for personnel and other operational needs to arrive at that implementation. I think we all know, those of us that have been involved in the process, that the line item budget is a little different than what's been done in the past. And we hope to the extent that there is a judgment made that there are problems with it, which there clearly are some, that we will be able, in the period between now and the veto session, to arrive at some better solutions. The governor is certainly open to that, and we will continue to do our part to meet with members of the General Assembly or working groups or legislative leaders and staff in order to address these things further. But until that action is taken, until a new set of green buttons are pushed that authorizes additional appropriation, we believe that the current budgetary situation requires these actions. And I will refer to Director Bishop about the greater detail as it relates to the Department of Juvenile Justice. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Are there questions from the committee? Mr. Vaught. Senator Lockenthal.
Keep in mind that, can you hear me? You got to hold it down. Okay, hold it down. All right. Keep in mind that I'm not on this committee, but I am the senator and Representative Mike Vaught from this district. Some questions that I have of the governor's office and of the department. Number one is why was there are a number of facilities, juvenile justice facilities in the state of Illinois. Why was this facility chosen? It is a rather new facility. I think it's run well. To give you an example, there was an attempt, I think, in an earlier budget to close the one at Pierre Marquette. What changed? Why this facility was chosen from all the others? And I understand there are some that are rather old and have some real problems with regard to the structure. Could you give me some answers on that, please?
Senator, I think that's very good and also a very difficult question. Those of us that work on the budget tend to be very numbers oriented. We look at the numbers and try to define the problem. But when it gets down to operational concerns like that, we like to rely on the advice and the recommendations of the department in terms of making those decisions. So that is the approach that we used in all the closure cases, was to seek the advice of the departments about how to solve the numbers problem. And so, if you don't mind, I would prefer to defer those detailed comparisons to the director, because that's who we relied on in giving us those evaluations.
Yes, thank you. Can you provide that answer?
In my total speech, or just specific to the question?
I would say, Bruce.
I would just prefer to refer that question to the director, because I think it's very specific as to the comparison
The specific
between Marquette and other facilities.
Again, as Mr. Vaught had indicated, we have been given the charge to operate within this. Actually, it's like approximately 12% budget cut. We enacted or proposed a budget of $134 million and some change.
Excuse me, is your microphone on?
Testing. Okay. Say that again.
Can you just start over and make sure the people in the back of the room?
In order for the Department of Juvenile Justice to operate within this approved budget that we have at this point, which is about a 12% reduction in what our proposed budget was of $134 million plus some dollars, 89% of our budget goes toward the operation of facilities. And so as we looked at our facilities on a statewide basis, and we looked at each of them individually, and this is not to indict Murphysboro as not having strengths, as all of our facilities do, and also having weaknesses. But when we looked at what the Department of Juvenile Justice was striving to do in terms of its new design and new development, a number of things, a number of factors came into play. First of all, 96% of the youth that's at Murphysboro, 96% of the youth that's committed come from counties outside of the southern region. Only 6% of the youth that are in Murphysboro come from the southern region. And so that's one area that we looked at. The other area that we looked at was the structure. Murphysboro, as everyone knows, at one point was a boot camp. That design was changed prior to my being appointed. That design was changed to a traditional facility. And so within that boot camp structure, then you have dorm-style arrangements. Now, there are different perceptions in terms of whether a dorm style is better than single rooms. Well, we believe that moving youth from a dorm style to a double bunk or having their own rooms are better therapeutically for youth than having youth in a dorm style setting. Secondly, when you look at the actual costs, fiscal costs per capita is $142,000 and some change annually per capita to care for youth that's in Murphysboro. And that's the highest per capita amount of any facility other than the girls' facility we have, and historically girls are only about 5% of our population. And so when you look at the per capita, and then you also look at, in terms of commitments, approximately 40% of the youth are committed from counties, from Cook County, and when you add the other surrounding counties, again, most of your commitments are outside of the southern region. So when you look at a therapeutic and look at a family engagement approach, we want to strive whenever possible to have youth as close to their family and as close to their community of origin as possible. So those were some of the thoughts and some of the thinkings that went into the decision about Murphy.
Excuse me, this is an official hearing, so we ask for
a follow-up question. You talked about 6% of the youth here in Cardinal are from this area. That probably is the case of a number of other facilities that are south of Springfield or in this state. That's not an unusually. You didn't address the question is, the Pierre Marquette, and I'm not trying to say we need to close another facility. I'm just saying, why did you choose this one? And Pierre Marquette was recommended to be closed a year or two ago. That didn't happen. I'm sure that not a very high percentage of the people there are from that area. Also, it is an older facility. I understand that you're going to move some of the people from, or at least intend to, from Murphysboro to that facility. Why did you choose this one over that one? And again, I'm not trying to say that we need to close another. I think likely those people would have some of the same arguments that we do of why to keep it open. Jobs, obviously, are the biggest of all of them, but I don't quite get the idea. First of all, the 6% doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And what about that particular facility?
Well, let me go back again to the decision making. Also, when we look at it from the fiscal challenge that we had in operating with a shortfall, because we did not get the recommended budget that was submitted, then by the closure of Murphysboro, then that will bring us closer to filling the gap of that shortfall. And so from an economic standpoint, then Murphysboro and the total, I'm going to answer the question. So if you're looking at decision making around Murphysboro, then that was one of the other primary decision makers, is that it allowed us to close the shortfall gap that we received with the approved budget as opposed to the recommended budget. When you're talking about Pierre Marquette, we made the decision July 1st to change Pierre Marquette from a girls' facility to a step-down facility for males who were ready and being prepared to re-engage back into the community. Again, that ties into the mission of the department now. We want to try to strengthen youth while they're in our care and then prepare them more effectively to re-engage in their community. So those 38, when they are totally full, those 38 boys who are ready to be discharged in their community have been transitioned to Murphysboro, where they get the specialized programming prior to being re-engaged in the community. And research has shown that that's important because when youth are engaged in appropriate programming and they receive the necessary aftercare support, it does a couple of things. One, youth remain in the community for longer periods of time. Research has also shown that youth do not commit new crimes. Research has also shown there's a positive impact on community safety. And the other piece of that is that by using Pierre Marquette for our downstate region, because we have an aftercare pilot in Cook County, we didn't have an aftercare process south of Cook County. We thought it was very important that we be able to pilot that downstate, so those youth that are coming back to the downstate regions, they would be able to step down and transition back into the community. That would save the state money as opposed to $86,000 a year per capita on an average. Serving a youth in the facility, then there's a tremendous reduction in cost by serving youth and providing for youth in their own community.
And in defense of the Department of Juvenile Justice, you have been, and that's why much of your testimony will be suspect, obviously, because you've been told by the governor, we're going to close the facility. Figure out a way to explain why. And you work for the governor. And so, again, all of that testimony will be somewhat suspect, I think, since you work for the governor. I understand your problem. Thank you.
Representative Bost.
Just a couple questions, please. First off, what of the new juvenile justice system, you were created in what year? Because before you were part of correction. Now, and then
2006.
2006. What is the administrative cost of the juvenile justice, the new juvenile justice?
It's approximately $2.5 million.
And the savings for Murphysboro?
When you look at the cost that we may incur by placing youth in the other facilities, about $3.1 million.
Okay.
And we would not get that savings if we close Pierre Marquette, then we would be talking multiple closings today, as opposed to one closure. To try to close the gap between the proposed budget and the approved budget.
All right. And that's water under the bridge as far as the creation of the juvenile justice system. When it was created, I argued that the cost would be more. Okay? The corrections had already had a successful run in operating the juvenile system. Murphysboro boot camp, as a boot camp, and I was around when it was created and I knew why it was created. We can't change that now. But we can in the future, and I'll look forward to trying to do that because I think that the system was working very successfully, and numbers show that it was better. All right. Now you may disagree with that. The problem I see, and I'm going to try to keep not doing that in the microphone. The problem I see is the argument that you just gave that what Pierre Marquette is used for. Murphysboro is a newer facility and could be used for the exact same thing, but for some reason it was chosen Murphysboro to be the one shut down. But you don't really have an answer why, right?
I think I've gone through the list of decision making, and again, and let me clarify the savings by the proposed closure of Murphysboro. That $3.1 million was only for 6 months. So if you annualize that, it's $6.2 million that you're talking about saving. And so again, our decision was based on having to operate under this budget that we have been given. And so the decision-making factors that I've shared are what they are.
Okay, I'll take matters to Mr. Director. Thank you, Madam.
Difficult time, I realize that. I know Governor made a commitment, contractual commitment. Simply my question was, if the General Assembly accepts the veto of $376 million, is the plan to keep all of these facilities that are proposed open?
Well, it would take two actions from the General Assembly. The vetoes would have to be sustained, but then there would also have to be reallocations of that money through an appropriation, which would require, as I said to Senator Lutterville the other day, a lot of green buttons to be pushed in the General Assembly, namely 71 in the House and 36 in the Senate. Because as long as the appropriations are insufficient, you can't spend the money. And so the governor is faced with this very difficult decision that if we analyze the head count and the attrition in these departments, especially these departments that are largely personnel, and you know from that analysis that unless you do something, you can't get through the year. Then you face this question of, do you take actions to live within the budget and implement the budget now? Or do you kind of play chicken and go, oh, I guess we'll reach a point where we can't meet the payroll? And the governor has decided not to play chicken and say, oh, maybe we can't meet the payroll next March or April or May. He's decided to implement the budget, and he thinks that's his constitutional duty once the General Assembly is acted and a final action is taken. So he's open to that, but it takes that second action, and that's why we want to have a further discussion.
So let me get to this point of the question. The governor signed a contract with the largest bargaining unit in the state that would have amounted to 8.1% over a 14-month period of time, somewhere around 16 months, something like that. The General Assembly zeroed that out of the budget, correct? Are these closures a result of him needing to obtain the money to meet the pay raises that he negotiated in October of last year? Or is this just a result of trying to, reduce because the General Assembly didn't say we're going to close any facilities. The General Assembly said we're not going to go along with an 8.1% pay raise. So I guess, are we closing these facilities to try to get the money to implement the pay raise? Or, are we just having a plan to close some facilities that aren't performing well?
Representative, our analysis is the budget is not adequate to do either currently. But I do want to clarify, this contract we're talking about, this labor contract was negotiated in 2008 before Pat Quinn was done. And it's a 4-year contract. There's since been a reform of that the General Assembly passed and the governor signed that says no governor in the future can commit a governor beyond his term more than the end of the fiscal year, which we think is an important reform. But those changes in 2008 were designed to also save money, and there was a further negotiation that Governor Pat Quinn agreed to with AFSCME to save money, and AFSCME asked for this layoff facility closure guarantee, which was agreed to. That certainly is correct. We're now faced with a situation where the governor has attempted to implement that, and the General Assembly is not appropriated enough to do it. I don't know how else to say that. But the purposes of a reallocation will have to be spelled out. We've laid out in our working groups yesterday, and we handed out some of the documents to be in the official record of this committee this morning. We've handed out alternatives that solve all the problems. We can calculate that $310 million will solve all these closure problems and provide raises, all the raises provided in the contract. And $310 million is within the $376 million of the veto. So it's certainly possible, and the governor is open to that kind of resolution. But he can't do it unilaterally. Just if the vetoes are sustained, he can't then unilaterally spend money that's not appropriated. So we have that second step. It's a point I'm maybe being repetitive and trying to make, but I think it takes us all to solve this, is what I'm saying.
Certainly, Murphysboro, the facility itself, and I have not seen the facility at Paramark yet, I haven't seen Harrisburg, but I know Harrisburg is a larger facility, but you're looking at an asset, and this is a much newer asset. Probably isn't putting the state at risk for the kind of maintenance that one of our other facilities may have in the case of Fair Marquette. Are there any capital dollars that are going to be needed to reconfigure any of the additional facilities to take the additional people? And what kind of capital commitments are the state looking at to maintain Fair Marquette versus in the future versus this facility at Murphysboro? Because it's much newer, and at some point in time we're going to put capital into Fair Marquette.
On the first question, no, there's no additional capital dollars that will need to go into the other facilities. Now, there will be an increase in terms of adding new headcount. So those staff that might come over to either Pierre Marquette or either St. Charles or whatever other facility that might receive the youth, then we would have to add additional staff, and that's where you get the net from the cost of the savings of closing Pierre Marquette, which was $6.2 million. Murphysboro, I'm sorry, but when you add in the cost that we would incur, let's say, of adding additional staff to the other facilities, then that's where you get approximately $4.4 million savings. So the cost would be 4.1. The cost would be the addition of staff.
Yeah, but if I'm looking at my bottom line, and I know that this facility may not have to have actual capital improvements made to it for a number of years, and Fair Marquette may, while this might solve an annual operating budget, the liability to the state taxpayers on Fair Marquette may be larger. And I just want to know if there was any kind of consideration for that.
Well, again, Representative, what we were dealing with is looking at the budget today, and that $119 million budget that we've had to address today. Then, in looking at Murphysboro, by the closure of Murphysboro, then that was the facility that brought us closer to closing that deficient gap than other facilities. Hypothetically, down the road, we always and we continue to look at what we need to do in terms of strengthening whether it's facility structure or programming. But as we sit here today, the decision is made.
But I have to make a decision on how I'm going to vote.
Sure.
And part of that decision is going to be based around which one of these facilities is the better of the two facilities. While the short term may provide a $4 million solution, the long term may provide much more liability to taxpayers state of Illinois. And sometime between now and the time we vote. I'm going to want an answer to that question if we can get that.
Yes, sir.
The other part of my question is, have we done an economic impact analysis on what closure of Murphysboro would do to the region of Murphysboro?
Yes, we have. I'll ask our chief fiscal officer to do economic impact study at this time. I want to speak on that.
Yeah, we had the economic impact study done by the University of Illinois in Champaign. The conclusion of the analysis was that the closure of Murphysboro would have an impact of a total of approximately 150 jobs. That includes the direct employment of the staff at Murphysboro, and then the indirect and the induced impact on jobs in the local community for a total impact of about 150 jobs, which equates to a labor income of almost $9 million on an annual basis.
I guess we have that here. I didn't see that. Is there any effort to assimilate these jobs into other parts of the state budget? Are people who may lose their jobs, are they being offered positions at one of the other facilities? Are they being offered any kind of, do they get first come, to any other job in the state, maybe one for Secretary of State or one of the agencies?
Yeah, as part of this process, we will have to negotiate a closure agreement with the unions that are involved with the employees. And as part of that, the department The Department of Juvenile Justice and the Department of Corrections, for the purposes of a layoff, are treated as one agency. So between the two agencies, there will be sufficient vacancies to offer these staff within 50 miles of Murphysboro for them to take employment. But now, some of those jobs may be in the Department of Corrections, others will be at IYC-Harrisburg, which is within 50 miles. But there will be sufficient jobs within 50 miles of Murphysboro to offer the impacted staff.
So if there's 99 staff members impacted, you're saying there'll be 99 job openings in other state facilities?
That is correct.
One follow-up.
Representative Potts.
Just one quick follow-up question, if I may. If the facility is actually shut down, was the cost calculated? Because you don't just walk away. How much do you spend right now? How much do we spend, does anybody know, on Thompson? Setting empty, what's the cost of, and what are we looking at there? Because that has to be added in as well.
Right. On Thompson, Thompson's a little unique because we still make a bond payment to the city for the construction of the facility, which adds about $350,000 to our annual costs. So in total, we spend between $700,000 and $800,000 a year on maintaining Thompson. That's, that includes the utilities, the bond payment to the village.
And what would be the cost for doing that same process here with an empty facility?
It would be much less, but I agree there would be a cost in maintaining, because we're not going to just walk away from the facility. There's still will be utility cost involved and general upkeep. As far as a number, anything I gave you would just be an estimate at this point.
Okay, if we could get that, that might help too. Thank you. Okay.
Models that we want to use, because it's still going to be a state facility. So have we thought about selling it? Who do we think about selling it to? Or is it just going to be mothballed indefinitely?
Senator, there's not an immediate plan, but certainly there have been discussions, and we want to look at the question of whether the Department of Corrections might want to use it in the future.
Okay, so what is your goal? I mean, how long are you going to be looking at plans, just versus
We want to consider and look at that for fiscal 13.
Senator Schmidt.
Yeah, this is a question to the director. While these kids, children, whatever, are incarcerated between 6 to 9 months, and I understand the issue of wanting the parents and their family, around them to help them through the tough times that they're going through. What is the visit? I mean, do you see a lot of visitors coming from Cook County or DuPage or Lake or wherever these, wherever these children are coming from? Do we see them getting any visitors?
No, we don't. Again, the youth that are in Murphysboro, for instance, primarily from the southern area. Again, we don't have, as we say today, we don't have any youth from Cook County. But the overall direction of juvenile justice is to, whenever possible and whenever appropriate, in terms of making sure that those youth are strengthened and are prepared to go back into the communities where they can hopefully stay in the communities. Research has shown that it's important that parental engagement, when clinically appropriate, parental engagement, and also trying to strengthen parents that have the responsibility also when those youth return to their communities to provide oversight and supervision, et cetera, for those youth. It's found that it's very important clinically, when appropriate, that parents try to be engaged whenever possible. We know that there's a tremendous challenge, whether it's in juvenile justice or child welfare, when youth are placed in facilities a long way from their communities. And so some of the recommendations and some of the research talks about televisiting. I may be saying it wrong, but visiting through Skype. And so there are a number of things that we're looking at that it may not call for a parent to drive 6 hours, let's say, if it were Cook County, or 2 hours, but to try to make, whenever possible, it amenable for parents or guardians or significant others to come and have some contact and relationship with that youth who 96% of them are going back to the community. And that's the other piece. 96% of the youth that are in juvenile justice are returning to the community. And so the question is, how do we want them to return?
And maybe I have this incorrect, but how many of the youth in Murphysboro are from outside the southern region?
Let me count it. We've got, only 6 of the 59 that were submitted under the Cochran report, only 6 of the youth were from the southern region of the 59.
Okay. Another question. On the other facility that's kind of been discussed, the Pierre Marquette facility, we talked about the cost of how much it is to operate per year per child at the Murphysboro facility, but do we have a cost for the other facility? Or are they just apples and oranges right now?
Right.
The cost of the Pierre Marquette facility, now, as the director mentioned, it was converted to a male step-down program effective July 1st, so our per capita cost would be for when it was operated as a female facility, and those costs were approximately $225,000 per year at that time for the females.
And what do we think will the cost be as a step-down per person?
That's something that we can certainly get you. However, because of economy of scale, by adding a population, it should drive down the per capita cost at any facility that would have an added population to it.
And the Pierre Marquette facility, that is not a dormitory style. That is a single bunk, double bunk?
It was converted, yes.
Converted, okay. And how old is that facility? I just wonder because I didn't know how much money would have to be spent to work.
Well, just a little history. I do know that prior to it becoming a girls, up until 2004, it was an all-male facility. And then in 2004, it was converted to a girls' facility. And then historically, again, our population has between 4 and 5% that are females. And prior to my being appointed, again, and everyone that's sitting here now know that was a tremendous challenge around the per capita cost of girls at Pierre Marquette would hold around $220,000, $240,000 annually. And so now we've, again, transitioned it to a step-down facility with a capacity of 38 low-risk males.
Thank you, Chairman Ballard. I really didn't intend on getting up there and asking a question, but I just can't help myself, David. Director Vaught, a White County guy, I'm Southern Illinois guy. Just a couple of questions. You talked about the governor vetoing the items, the regional superintendents, the transportation funding, the human services, and that he looked at this and decided that in order to be able to manage this budget, he had to make those vetoes in the budget. I guess my question to you is, it's my recollection that the governor signed this budget very quickly. So why didn't he evaluate that along with you and your staff during the process of passing the budget to where he could have vetoed that budget, sent it back to us, and maybe we could have corrected this early on? And quite frankly, what's disturbing about this is to put these communities and these employees through this hassle. We're devastating communities like Murphysboro and the other communities around over the state, and because these employees are not spending the money that they normally would. I'm sure that the day the announcement came out, they ran home from work that day and told the family, hey, no more spending. So that not only affects their family, but it affects the community. So I guess my question really is why did the governor sign this budget so quickly? Because you have people sitting in every appropriations committee analyzing, the financial officers of each agency sitting in those hearings.
Senator, I certainly still claim White County, though I did not make it to Corn Day this year, and I kind of regret not having done so last weekend. The governor has vetoed a budget before. He did it in fiscal 2009 And we went in, as you well recall, into overtime into July 15th to get a budget. It's a hard decision when you see problems with the budget. Certainly we saw problems with the budget. We tried to express that to the legislative leaders and others, during April and May, especially in late May, as we understood this better. But the governor made a judgment that it was better to sign a budget with problems in it and move on, knowing that he could use the veto pen to further reduce some of the spending in it that he thought was not necessary or appropriate. And that, I think we've learned in the crisis that the budget, though it contains many dire consequences, and many people have suffered through the recession and through the difficulties the state has had fiscally in prior budgets in 09 and 10. And I think he's very well aware of that, because he, as you, hears from those people, and I think it causes him great concern. But I think he made the decision to use the vetoes and to ask the General Assembly to keep reconsidering the budget going forward, as we're doing on the reallocations. And I think that was a judgment call on his part that you can certainly question if you want. But having been through the more difficult process of vetoes and disagreement and the difficulty that creates, he thought this was a better process, even though it has many flaws, as you point out.
Well, I think really to give the correct answer, I'm going to give you the correct answer of why the governor signed it so quickly and then chose to veto later on. You've talked to some of us today. I know you talked to appropriations meetings in Chicago yesterday, because I saw you there while I was in Chicago at JCAR yesterday. And explaining it's not a supplemental bill that you want in veto session, it's a reallocation of funds. Much like this spring, whenever the governor was proposing borrowing money, he didn't want to call it borrowing, he wanted to call it restructuring the debt. It was borrowing money. It wasn't restructuring the debt, it was borrowing money to pay bills on. But I guess the answer is that as you and the governor are going around right now, trying to get support from the General Assembly, both Republicans and Democrats, to support the reallocation of funds, is what you call it. I call it a supplemental appropriations. The real reason the governor vetoed it, and his almost exact words, I can't quote him exactly, I should have brought the newspaper articles maybe, or the TV cuts, but his statement was, I didn't want to let the Republicans be involved in this. That was the actual statement that he made.
Senator, you may remember his statement very precisely, because you were either there or heard it. But the Republicans are involved in this process in appropriations in both the House and the Senate. And as you know, there are different relationships and different ways that things get worked out in those two bodies. I think we did, it's true, a lot more work with the Republicans in the House than we did in the Senate. But that doesn't mean we didn't meet with the Republicans in the Senate. We didn't try to have a better relationship. And I think, as you know, we've got a long way to go to make that better. So hopefully we'll learn from history and keep trying to do a better job.
Well, just a final thing. I would think that maybe you need to send a message along with the governor to all the agency's financial officers and your staff to do a little better job of observing the process and when it goes through.
Mr. Vaught, I would like to disagree with one of the things that you said. I would like to take issue with it. I think you said something to the effect that if you let this go until the General Assembly met, that there would be sort of a game of chicken played between the General Assembly and the governor's office of who was going to bend with regard to running out of money. I guess what really bothers me about this particular issue, and you have to really be close to it to fully understand. I think if it happens to another community, you don't pay as much attention. But if you're close to it, we're sort of playing chicken with a lot of people's lives in this particular situation. And I guess that the governor chose to do that rather than play chicken with the General Assembly. And so there is a game of chicken being played here. There's no question about it. This is a game we're playing. And it's not a pretty one for people who their livelihoods are depending on it. Thank you.
Representative Paul.
Just
is for the director. Could you tell me a little bit about, and I want to talk about corrections and youth and everything, but, and I don't know if I'm reading the paper right in Springfield, but it's saying something like there's 39,000 incarcerations in Illinois. Is that close to where we're at?
That's the adult.
Right. What's the total?
On the adult side, it's about 49,000 inmates. Correct?
49,000?
Yes.
And what is the bed capacity if we use the standards and not doubling up and tripling up?
In the Department of Corrections?
Yeah, and then there's another number out there, 34,000 beds, and we got 49,000 prisoners. Is that true?
Depending on the definition of the capacity that you want to use, looking at rated capacity, yes, that is true. The Department of Corrections has historically operated well over rated capacity for many, many years.
Well, another concern I have, and then also reading the paper in Springfield, is we're talking about putting them in gymnasiums because we have other prison closures. And what I'm getting, trying to get your arms around this whole thing, and as the representative said, this is a huge, big facility we have here. And when we got that much overcrowding in Illinois already, why would we even ever consider closing any facility when we can move, if we have to, use part of it for adult, whatever we have to do to try to get past that. And then I'd hope whenever the director and the rest of you look at economic areas before you close down a facility. I mean, no facility is easy to close down, but I'm going to tell you what, there's a lot more jobs north of I-80 than there is south of I-80. It's just something that we're playing the life, and the director and I talked about this at Rockford the other night, and I questioned a lot like Senator Jones did, why didn't we veto this? And I think there's a reason right now where these people have no confidence in the governor or the legislators. And I think it's because we didn't do our job. If we can't do our job, and you knew this was happening, you admitted last week that you'd seen this coming, why didn't we veto the bill? Why didn't we stand Springfield? Why didn't we fix this? And we would be parading around all over the state of Illinois having these dog and pony shows. It's just not right that we keep our citizens that way. So, because everything I hear, I talk to reporters, everybody has the feeling that this very possibly can be fixed in veto session. And boy, it's a shame we had to do this. Actually, I wish that we'd have tried to work it out in veto session. Then if it didn't get worked out, then we went to the closures, because then everybody would know for sure they would be in limbo. Right now, I think everybody's in limbo, wondering what's going to happen in veto session. And along with the senator, I just don't like these kind of games of chicken. That's why they don't send us to Springfield to do that. They send us to Springfield to solve problems.
Representative, we've got serious problems in this budget, and the governor has taken 2 actions to implement the budget the General Assembly passed. And he suspended raises, which is not, it make a lot of people happy. And he's announced these facility closures. And when you add up those 2 actions, about $75 million for the raises, about $55 million for the facility closures, it's $130 million. We still have $180 million left to go if we're going to implement this budget. $180 million in closures or other budgetary actions that have not yet been announced or decided by the governor about how to implement. So this is a serious problem, and it's not one that I agree, we shouldn't wait to solve it. We should try to solve it right away. But these are just the first 2 steps here, and the governor made reference to that in his statement. Senator Jones referred to his statements, but he made a statement in September that phase 3 is going to be difficult as well. This is what we're facing when we face fiscal challenges in our state, and nobody likes it. I don't like it. I don't like hearing about people losing their livelihoods. Neither does the governor or anybody here. But the numbers have to add up at some point.
I don't think anyone on this panel disagrees with you, but I think it's timing, and I think the timing was back, the 1st of June.
I totally agree that the sooner we solve this, the better off we'd be. I don't want to disagree with you about that for sure.